You want a shout out for me and have more vids frequently? Then support me on Patreon, where the cost is only $3. So, I finally took the time to watch me some nice and fresh Final Space content. Which means I took the day to binge Season 2. I had a lot of wonder and fear of how this season was going to go. I consider Season 1 to be the best season to come out in 2018. I even believe that how the final episode of the season ended was perfect because it left so much to theorize in case TBS decided to pull that plug. Even with that, the mystery of how Season 2 was going to fare depends on the new additions to the show. There was a whole lot of things to take in when it came to the big reveals, the developments, and many more. I'll try my best not to get too spoiler-filling, but it'll be quite difficult. So, good morning everyone. My name is Jason Blade, and this is a Bat's perspective of Final Space Season 2.
The Toro Regatta, sponsored by Dark Juice. Before you disintegrate in a vain attempt at glory, taste the freshness of Dark Juice. I'm chugging one right now!
Starting things off with the overall animation, it still holds up to par with the amount of detail the worlds they reside in each episode. Another thing that continues to be strong is the solid mix between 2D and 3D animation. Outside of that, I also really enjoy the intro of Season 2 a lot more compared to Season 1 because it is a lot livelier and it makes it seem that the season will contain a lot of action-packed moments. That is 100% the case in this season, as I do believe that the action is the biggest enjoyment that I have with the series. Specifically, I'm talking about the fight scenes that occur. They felt a lot longer and each angle is presented perfectly. Not to mention the amount of emotions being poured into each attack and facial expression. Whether serious or comedic, the expressions given within the fights made it so chilling to watch, and the building substance in the few hand-to-hand combats were very appreciated.
Little Kato, this is serious.
Yeah, I'm looking at you right now. I don't see anything serious.
For the music, while they did change composers from Jake Sidwell to Andrew Goodwin, it was still able to drive the story in a compelling way. As a matter of fact, Season 2's composition is most certainly in the same level as Season 1. The only time that it really felt distracting was when we hear the intro song for the first time mixed with a simple chime at the end of the opening narration of the season that became too glaring. Which is the most nitpicky thing I ever did.
Isn't Ava the best? Right, Hugh? Do you hear me? Hugh.
Have I really
Hugh.
sunk this
Hugh.
low?
You sure have.
Next up is the characters, and man oh man, there were a lot of returning one-offs and mainstays, and a fair amount of new faces that were introduced in Season 2. Starting off with the returning main cast, a lot of them still held up to their standards outside of one particular character, which I will get to later. As I said with Season 1, I absolutely love Gary because he is one of the more unique main characters I've seen in recent memory, and I still hold him to that standard even after the second season. The show continued to sink into his development very well by having him experience his consequences of not saving the Earth, his past catching up to him, and his growing family bond with Little Kato. Speaking of Little Kato, he also gets some good development going on with a few episodes being focused on how he's coping with the death of Avocado, among other things. Kevin is, well, being Kevin. Tribor, same thing. We do get to see a bit of love for Nightfall when it comes to development. Finally, Hugh. Good God, what did they do to you? Honestly, as soon as the trailers show him in that cheap, canned good of a body, I had a really bad feeling they were going to make Hugh a depressing bag of tin cans. That proved to be true for me. A lot of the jokes revolving around him were misses than hits because it wasn't as charming. It feels like that they tried too hard to make an opposite of the happy-go-lucky yet hated Kevin. While I understand that since the Galaxy 1 was destroyed, they needed to find some way to keep Hugh around. But I just didn't think the robot was it. Perhaps having his AI be a part of some sort of trinket that can be attached to Gary, like a smartwatch? I don't know. Another character that was put in a bigger role that was more of a way to introduce the new faces of the main cast and hang around was Clarence. I never cared for him in season 1, and he proved to overstay his welcome in season 2. So many times he's done super crappy things to someone, and he barely got much karma until the second to the last episode. Plus, his joke variety was not pleasant and very uncomfortable to watch. That's the big issue that I have with Clarence as a character. When he isn't the focus, he's barely noticeable. When he is...
Just push me in!
Jesus Christ. So let's get into the new mains, starting off with the AI of the Crimson Light, Ava. Ava is just a sexualized copy of Hugh, and her main thing is just teasing Hugh. That shows you how much thought is put into her. The next two are Ash Graven and Fox, the adopted children of Clarence. Both are insecure in their own little ways, but they do play their roles a lot better than their father. Fox is a much gentler giant who gets very emotional easily, and also is the main rival of Little Kato. While he doesn't do much in the major story outside of being the muscle, he was a very enjoyable comic relief to loosen the tension between the characters, and his small mini arcs gets me every time. As for Ash, she does play a bigger role into the season, with one of the keys being attached to her past and the building relationship she has with Little Kato and Nightfall. When it comes to new villains, we have 3 new faces that becomes obstacles: Todd Watson, Cheryl Goodspeed, and Invictus. Todd, aka Hushfluffles, was a man who wants to kill Gary to avenge his family. While not the biggest villain in the series, he does play a big role in being a reminder of Gary's failure of saving the Earth. By doing everything he can to take Gary down, he served very well as an alliance to other villains as the season went on. For Cheryl Goodspeed, she was incredibly interesting from day one. She is the mother of Gary, and she was tasked to collect the keys for her own personal gain, which puts her against her own son. It doesn't bother her because of her own hatred for Gary for costing her his father, John Goodspeed. So we do get to see her clash with the crew very often, and the building of chemistry between her and Gary become greater as the season went on. It was a wonderful thing to see develop, and I'm very excited to see where things go for the two in the next season. Finally, we have Invictus. Invictus is the main titan that is ready for the destruction of the universe, being the main puppeteer that drives the main cast to their limit. He played a huge role in the biggest arc that focuses on Little Kato. More on that later. I do think from a character perspective, it was a huge mix of characters being developed very well, and others that don't really do much to help move the story outside of an episode or two.
But this time feels different. And when it takes you, tell it. We're coming to kill it.
Now we get to the overall story, and as I've been saying throughout this video, it is a lot to take in from the overall perspective. There are a lot of moments that occurred within the season that really makes you second guess on what could eventually happen. However, how many moments do you get before they become a moment for a moment's sake? Don't get me wrong, when in the moment, they grab your attention very easily with those high stakes and wonderful executions. However, when you start looking at it in the overall perspective of things, Season 2 kind of takes away some of the magic Season 1 had to offer in 2018. The biggest culprit of doing this is the use of time travel in Season 2. While yes, Season 1 did have some time travel within it as well, it wasn't the biggest focus outside of the introduction of Nightfall. In Season 2, it played one of the biggest roles in the story. It was the focus on grabbing a key and other moments that are very spoiler heavy. All I can say is that it completely negates one of the biggest moments in Season 1, and it does disappoint me. It does give us a very interesting arc for our main character after the time traveling bits, but it only stays within the season, and I really think it should have continued in the next one because it had so much potential to be an incredibly good arc for all involved. Still, the character development in general was still the strongest point for Final Space. While I do think some of the characters can be forgettable, the arcs do give you some sort of interest with the story development they get placed in. Comedy-wise, it's still a bit of a hit and miss for me because while I do enjoy some of the witty commentary and the personalities of a few of the characters, there's still some jokes that I'm just not a fan of personally.
Are you okay?
I'll deal.
Okay, that didn't sound like you were okay.
I said I'll deal.
Overall, I think this season is pretty good. Final Space continues to do very well from a character's development standpoint. The amount of attention they gave to a lot of the newer faces was great to see, and they still give enough love to the returning cast as well. Also, the new cast of villains are a huge upgrade over the Dark Lord. The music and animation still hold up to par to last season, and that's all you can ask for. However, there are a few characters that did little to nothing for the story outside of maybe one arc. Clearance. And the story can easily be strong, possibly even stronger without them. Also, time travel didn't need to play as big of a role as it did. Still, there's still a large amount of enjoyment if you don't think about how it affected the series overall too much. So, my quote for this season is, could we use Clarence for the time swap instead? Thanks for taking the time to see this Bat's perspective. If you would like to see other perspectives, click the videos to the left. If you want to be the first to see future videos, click the subscribe and bell icon to get the latest from me. Until then, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.